What's up, YouTube? Welcome back to my channel. It's been a long time, and this is a video that is very long overdue. What we're looking at here is my personal rig. This is a build I think I started planning towards the end of 2018. It took over a year between planning, acquiring parts, fabricating, lumber work, that sort of thing, to actually complete this thing. It's been done for about a year. I just haven't really been doing much in the way of making content, so I apologize for that if anyone was kind of waiting for stuff to get posted, but I'm sure many of you can relate. Given everything that's happened the past year, inspiration and motivation has kind of been hard to come by. But the reason I'm finally making this video is, unfortunately, as gorgeous as this PC is, it's about to get disassembled for a new project. So I figured before I did that, I should go ahead and do a walkthrough of the build here. This is going to be kind of old school for some of you guys that have seen some of my older videos where I used to kind of do some pretty off-the-cuff walkthroughs of some of my builds. That's kind of the style I'm going to go with today. I just don't have a whole lot of time for production and that sort of thing, so I just want to show everyone sort of the ins and outs of what we're looking at here. I'm really happy with the way this thing turned out, and some of you might think I'm crazy for taking it apart, but for me, the fun of doing this is never really in the having the completed project. The fun of it for me is planning and creating it. So I've had enough time with it. I don't want to say I'm sick of it, but I'm ready to move on. So I'm going to go ahead and take my camera off the tripod here, and I'm going to walk you around and sort of show you what we got going on here. So to start with, believe it or not, what we are looking at is a Lian Li PC-011 dynamic that is turned on its side. Now if you saw the top, this panel here would sort of give it away. But what would normally be like, I don't know, I guess the side of the case, assuming that you consider the big window as the front, it's just been rotated 180 degrees. So all of the I/O, instead of coming out of the back or the side, is actually coming out of the bottom of the PC. So again, this was an idea I had a while back. I can't recall ever seeing any sort of build of this caliber with, and sorry about the glass here, maybe I'll take this glass off so that we don't have this reflection. Actually, you know what, I'm gonna go ahead and do that. But to continue my thought, I hadn't seen a build, at least this custom, that had this sort of orientation and layout. So I thought it'd be a really unique way to present the PC. This one here, most people when they see it almost don't even know what they're looking at, especially if they're not familiar with what custom water-cooled PCs look like. It looks sort of like some kind of crazy, I don't know, like machine from the 50s or something. But anyway, let me take this glass off so we don't have a glare, and I can show you what's going on the inside. Okay, so panel's off, much better, no reflection, other than, I don't know, the light's kind of washing out some of the stuff, but whatever, it is what it is. So first I want to talk about the wood here. So my cousin's a pretty good woodworker, and I gave him the plans. We found some Missouri walnut. Unfortunately, it was not seasoned yet, so it had to sit for a while and dry out enough that we could work with it. It was worth the wait, but I think we got stuck waiting about 6 months before we could finally use it. But he did a really good job cutting all the panels. It's not perfect. It's really difficult to get wood to match up perfectly with metal components, because I guess unless you have some pretty sophisticated tools. This was all done by hand. There's no router table or anything that was used for this. Even these holes, these were cut with hole saw bits. The edges, which if you can see that are rounded, these were all done by hand. And then all of the book matching, everything was done by hand. So that being said, I think it turned out pretty awesome, and as long as you don't really scrutinize some of the close-up details, you'd be hard-pressed to really have anything to complain about as far as the wood paneling is concerned. Obviously, walnut is a gorgeous wood. It's got a really nice grain to it. We found some cool sections that really create some awesome depth. This panel up here, which is kind of the main showpiece, really, and the camera doesn't do it justice, has some awesome striping through it, and then that sort of mirrors the panel down here. So obviously some modifications had to be done to the case itself, and then all of the panels had to be cut to fit. So this build definitely took a lot of work, but that's part of the fun of what we do here when we make our own custom PCs. But other than that, yeah, I mean, that's kind of the main feature of the build. I think that the contrast of the shiny fittings and chrome piping, along with the wood grain, and then I actually went with white cabling this time because I thought it contrasted really well with the dark color of the wood. It doesn't really show up all that well on camera because the LEDs are washing it out, but this isn't bright white sleeving. It's actually what they call natural white, so it's a little bit more toned down. But anyway, what we got going on here as far as the build is concerned, and these are sort of older components. I could have upgraded some of the stuff before I built this, but this is an 8700K that I delidded. It runs very stable at 5 gigahertz, and this is a 1080 Ti. So the match of the CPU and the graphics card, which, we're going on, what, 3, maybe 4 years old? I don't even remember. For the time when these components came out, they were an amazing value. You're not going to find anything like this, maybe ever again, as far as what you got for your money. 1080 Ti is still a very relevant card today, and the 8700K is no slouch either. So I really didn't see a need to upgrade when I built this, and in a way I wanted to sort of showcase these specific components because, again, I feel like for the time we were seeing some really exciting advancements in performance for the price. Now I feel like everything's gotten so expensive, it's just and difficult to find, that this sort of brings me back to a time when it was a little bit more fun to keep up with things and build PCs. But anyway, I've got dual 360 rads. One of them obviously is intake, and the other one is exhaust. These are EK Coolstream PEs, EK Vardar fans, and then obviously EK blocks. I actually did something I hadn't seen before. I used the EK Monarch RAM blocks or heat shields, heat spreaders, whatever you want to call them. Normally you would attach the water block to the top of these, but I wanted that chrome look to match the rest of the build, which I think it turned out pretty awesome. I've got the old school nickel CPU block, all bits power, shiny chrome fittings with bits power tubing here. I've actually got, which I'll show you when I spin this around, but I have 2 drain ports on this build, and I did that because it's such a complicated system of tubing runs that I wanted to be able to make, when it comes to disassembly, I could see that I would have difficulties draining the loop and disassembling it if I only had one drain port. So I went ahead and put one in the front and then one in the back that you'll see, which is where the pump and everything else is. Not to mention, I think it's just a cool looking piece. If you're thinking of this as just showcasing some cool like pipe work and plumbing work, it's kind of neat to see the valve here. So especially this would have been a somewhat empty space had I not put it there. So yeah, aside from that, I don't think there's much else to talk about. Obviously what you're seeing up here is we're going through some pass-throughs through this wood panel. That'll be more obvious when I show you the back of the case. I've got a LED strip up here on this edge, and obviously it looks pretty cool when you look at it through the top glass. But yeah, it was definitely a labor of love putting this build together. It took a lot of effort to get the piping on the sides to be symmetrical. Now, obviously, they don't bend at the exact spot because where they're going into the radiators is in kind of a different plane. But that being said, still pretty awesome. So I'm going to go ahead and flip this around so I can show you guys the back of the case, kind of see the inner workings of what's going on here. Obviously very clean. Oh, and this here, that's just a piece of acrylic along with here. Like I usually like to do with my builds, if there's any area of the case that has, you know, erroneous holes and that sort of thing, I just cover them up with a panel so it's a much cleaner look. But yeah, that's it for the front. I will go ahead and spin this around and we'll look at the back. So here we are looking at the back of the PC, and if it's not obvious, I decided on purpose to leave this open for two reasons. One, it's just way easier to access things when I need to, given the way that this case is kind of like slid into a wooden frame. I didn't want to be having to pull this thing apart every time I needed to do something simple. The other reason is I think it looks cool. I didn't want to cover it up, even though you don't really see it that often. It's still kind of neat to look at. I put so much effort into, you know, if any of you have ever done custom cables before, it's not that difficult to make extensions or cables that are all one length. But when you're doing stuff like this, you have to, each individual wire has to be cut to a specific length to get these cables to do what you want them to do and not have any excess bulk around and have these really clean cable runs. So I think it's pretty obvious looking at this that it's about as close to perfect as I could have gotten, and it took a lot of time and a lot of effort. There's probably 20 hours just in these cables. Yeah, I didn't want to cover that up. I wanted to be able to look at them and show them off. I'm noticing now that I couldn't have picked a better time to disassemble this PC, because this fluid is for sure, this is about a year on this fluid, and it's definitely due for a change. And all I'm running is Mayhem's X1 coolant, so nothing fancy. I left everything clear on the backside for two reasons. One, you don't see it, so I didn't need to use the chrome tubing. But the other reason is I wanted to be able to see the water flow. That's one of the disadvantages of using those solid pipes, is you can't see the flow. So in case there were any issues, I wanted to make sure I could at least see what was going on. But I ended up using a DDC pump. I might have been able to use a D5, but it would have hung down a little bit lower, and I guess that's not necessarily that big a deal, but I sort of wanted to keep this contained within the footprint of the case itself. All the fans are spliced into splitters that then go into this, the Aqua, oh God, what the heck is this thing called? The Aqua Tuning Quadro. I hate it. I thought it would be awesome, but I've never been able to get, and I don't know if it's something that I did wrong. I'm not going to just throw them under the bus, but I've just never been able to get it to work right as far as my fan control goes. The fans actually act a little bit erratic, and they don't ever seem to be reading the proper RPM on the fans. So again, maybe I'm doing something wrong, but I would never use one of those again. I'm just not happy with it. From now on, I'm just going to stick to plugging into the motherboard and using motherboard controls and just not adding that sort of hassle into the mix. But other than that, pretty straightforward. Had to build this sort of elevation off of the desk so that you could get all your stuff plugged into the motherboard, power supply, all that stuff, and then this is the other drain port. So whatever doesn't drain out from the back, I can drain out from the front and be able to drain the loop, take it apart, which is what I'm about to do. So it's going to be really sad, I guess, to see this thing go. But again, like I said at the beginning, I have more fun doing new builds. So unfortunately, to do new builds, I have to take old builds apart. And we had a good run, but it's time to say goodbye. So there it is. If you guys have any questions, comments, feel free to post in the comments below, email me, whatever you feel like you need to do. I try my best to answer questions. I don't do this professionally, and I don't really make very much money doing it. So unfortunately, I can't really allocate a whole lot of time, but I do try my best. So let me know what you guys think. Feel free to ask any questions, and hopefully it won't be another year or so before I post another video. I do have 1 or 2 builds that I'm planning right now, so maybe if things go well, I'll be able to upload another video in the near future. But until next time, as always, I appreciate you guys checking out my videos, and we'll see you later.